Bilateral exchanges between China and Russia have been highly frequent over the past few years. There have been 15 meetings between the two presidents, and their meeting in Beijing came just 2 days after their talks in Tashkent. So what are your views on this unusual number of interactions, and what does their strategic partnership entail, Mr. Yang?
Well, the growing frequency of the exchanges at the top level really reflects the fast growing of the bilateral relationship in both in the wide ranges and in depth. Especially for this summit, the two presidents signed 3 fundamental and strategic joint statements that not only lay a better base for the bilateral relations in the future, but also set up a framework for a more justice and a more fair international order as a framework. So I think the 3 documents will not only as a guidelines for the bilateral relation, but also guideline for the new type of international relations that is based on mutual benefits and equality.
So besides having trade deals and different strategic considerations, I think the two countries are also cultivating a sense of trust between each other. So your thoughts on this, Mr. Cui?
Yes, exactly. As we know now, these two countries are kind of a comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination. It's a very, very special, among all of this strategic partnership in China, for China. As we know, not only for this very, very high mutual political trust, and also more and more cooperation. Of course, this time, especially during the visit by Mr. Putin in Beijing, we can find so many, a number of signature for so many agreements and deals. It shows that now for China and Russia, we want to, broaden this cooperation, and not only for, traditional energy and military and also political exchange, and also more this time. I mean, the most impressive highlights for me is it looks like both two countries are going to kick off the very, very large scale cooperation in infrastructure, transportation, and I think it's a very, very good starting point for both the countries.
And now let's turn to Mr. Lukin in Moscow. President Putin's visit to Beijing was very short but very fruitful. We mentioned there were 3 major joint statements and over 30 trade deals. However, analysts say that it seems that economic cooperation between the two countries are lagging behind their political ties. Your thoughts on this, Mr. Lukin?
I don't think so. Actually, there is a discussion in Russia, and that's why this visit was particularly interesting. There is a discussion about if China and Asian countries in general can substitute Russian traditional partners, European partners especially, after the worsening of the relations between Russia and Europe and the West in general. And some people say that Chinese potential is not enough. China is behaving too egoistically, and it's a tough negotiate. And as you said before, the trade volume is shrinking, and so on. So it is very important that this time, and also last time, end of last year, the last meeting between the president, we signed Russian and Chinese companies signed a lot of new deals, which show that we're entering a new stage of economic cooperation. The main theme is first, Chinese investment is in Russian energy sector is now allowed, and which was very difficult before. It's a new stage of Russian arms sales to China. Russia began to sell to China the most advanced military technology.
Right,
and now we came to a stage of integration, because we have, as you said, more than 30 deals of various joint ventures and investment.
Right, and now we have some figures to illustrate the trade relations between China and Russia. Although high-level exchanges between the two countries are frequent, figures show that trade volume has shrunk. The figure fell from around $100 billion in 2014 to a little over $60 billion in 2015. Observers have attributed this to various reasons, including Western sanctions placed on Russian economy, a devalued ruble, and China's economic slowdown. So, gentlemen, what exactly can the two partners do to turn the tide, Mr. Yang?
Well, first of all, I think in terms of value of currencies, the volume shrink dramatically. But if you look at the volume of the commodities, the size was increasing. So the reason was, why the shrinking, the reason was not the devaluation by ruble, but because of the sharp declining of the prices of the energy products, oil and the gas. That means Russia exported more gas and oil to China, but in terms of the dollar, in terms of RMB, in terms of rubles, yes, shrinked. And the statistics is based on not volume, but based on value. So that's the fundamental reason. Of course, you mentioned the other reason, sanction measures, and devaluation, and some other China slowdown. But I think Chinese economic slowdown didn't affect the trade, and the sanction on Russia didn't affect the trade because China had a little effect from the Western sanction on China, on Russia. Only the devaluation and the sharp declining the prices that contributed the declining of the trade volume.
And hopefully that in the future, these 30 trade deals will will further strengthen the trade ties between the two countries. But let's talk about this. Why do you think the two countries define their relations as partners instead of allies? How far are they from becoming real allies?
It's always hot issue, especially in Western media. So what's the nature of China-Russia relations? Is kind of alliance or some other? I think from China's perspective, always China insists that there will not be any ally with China, and always for this at this moment, especially, Chinese government stressed that. We will have more partners, but not an alliance. Because as you understand, even from a Russian side, I think it takes a similar stance. I think that's the reason. The reason is because both the countries, they recognized their own responsibility as a big country. So it's so important for China and Russia to make clear that we are not an alliance, we're just partners. We can work together. But we will not work together to fight against other countries. I think it's very, very important views. Why? Because once there are alliance between China and Russia, you can imagine that there's a very, very big imbalance of international strategy or international order that will give a very, very bad impact on current international order. I think that's a very, very big showcase. For China and Russia. They are a big country, but they are a big country with big responsibilities.
And it seems that China and Russia have been working so closely together on a lot of regional and international issues that sometimes bilateral considerations are taking the back seat in major international meetings. So, Mr. Lukin, I'd like to have your insight on this. How far do you think China and Russia are from becoming real allies?
Well, we don't need to be an ally if you think that an ally is a formal agreement of common defense, because we had alliances 3 times in our history and it never worked. For example, we had border clashes in late 1960s and we formally were allies at that time. So I think that Russia and China are big countries, as it was said, and it's very difficult for such big countries to be allies if there is no a very direct common threat. So I think that if our Western partners are going to press Russia and China further together, if they are going to threaten Russia's interest and Chinese interest, maybe in sometime in the future we can think about forming an alliance. But at the moment, it's not necessary.
Well,
we are
it's important that you
cooperating,
brought this up
very
because
well without it.
yeah, because some analysts are arguing that the future of Sino-Russian relationship will be defined to a large extent by how these two countries deal with the West and particularly the U.S. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but not necessarily. I think that close relations and strategic partnership is in the interest of both our countries, regardless to our relations to third countries. But if the U.S. And the West in general is going to endanger our interests and China's interests, this will certainly push us together, closer together strategically.
And it seems that Mr. Cui really agrees with Mr. Lukin. What he said about this relationship between China and Russia has probably little to do with their relation with the U.S.
No, I don't think so. Even, of course, now we are not the alliance now at this moment, because just like Russian expert mentioned, it's not necessary at this moment. But of course, for China and Russia, we share more and more, common interests. And also, we are trying to work together to deal with some common challenges, including this time. I mean, this visit, both two leaders, I mean, Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin, they signed so many agreements. For example, they are work together to, fight against some cyber threat or some other. But now, of course, on the other side is, at the same time, China and the U.S. we're also trying to, develop our relations. The relations between, the major powers like that, and also between Russia and the United States or some other Western countries. They do have their own, logic to develop their own relations. So I don't think that now it's already in a very, very dangerous time for China and Russia. We need to work together to fight against the third country, even namely United States. Yes, I agree with Mr. Lukin's real points. Yeah.
What about you, Mr. Yang? Do you agree that China and Russia relations are not dependable to any third country?
No, but the third country will become fast-growing strategic variables on Russia-China cooperation and coordination. First of all, I agree with our two colleagues say no need to forge alliances. For example, neither Russia nor China want to pull the relationship among big powers into Cold War, back to Cold War.
Yeah.
We oppose to back to Cold War. The modern alliance is actually a product of Cold War. U.S. still strongly insist on alliance because they remain in Cold War with a mindset. But China and Moscow and Beijing, no. We are looking forward to the 21st century. We are looking forward to post-Cold War era for a new type of relationship. So no necessary. But if U.S. really increase the strategic pressures on Russia and China, for example, an anti-missile system against Russia and China, that will certainly increase the cooperation and the coordination between Moscow and Beijing. For example, in fact, the two presidents this time issue a very strong wording statement, joint statement regarding to the global strategic stability. The two presidents enhance the specific global determination of the global strategic stability into the general meaning because of the common threats from the U.S. But as I mentioned, both of the presidents determined to not go to the Cold War, but through the dialogues, through the negotiations, through the cooperations to prevent the world from sliding into Cold War. And the hot points now is the missile system. That's why the two countries has strengthened the cooperation on this issue from both the Western front and the Eastern front.
And if we take a look at the regional landscape, gentlemen, really what deserves attention are the two regional initiatives proposed by China and Russia. China has been busy promoting the Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to enhance economic ties with countries along the route, and many of them are in Central Asia, neighboring Russia. And at the same time, Russia really wants to promote its initiative, its own initiative of the Eurasian Economic Union. Mr. Lukin, let me give you the final question. Do you see competition between these two regional initiatives?
No, there's cooperation. Actually, our leaders last May signed a declaration about coordination between the two projects. Now the countries are already working on it. Of course, Russia and China can provide different things. China can invest quite a lot in the project, especially in Central Asia and also in Russia. Russia can provide some security guarantees because, for example, within Shanghai Cooperation Organization, there is a big threat of terrorism, and we should also promote stability and economic cooperation. So I think we can complement each other and work together very well with each other. There should be no competition. Of course, there can be some competition between individual companies and from Russia and China in particular areas, but no interstate competition.